We have with us a very special person, Sarita Sundar. Sarita is based out of Bangalore and is a graphic artist and researcher based, she works across the country and also internationally. And she's the founder of Hanno, Hanno, which is a heritage interpretation and design consultancy um, organization. And her interests, especially in cultural and design history, have led to the direction of the work, which range from examining the visual culture of vernacular typography to research into the intangible and material culture of uh, performance practices in certain temples in Kerala. Sarita has taught and evaluated courses on the history of design at the National Institute of Design in Ahmedabad and also Srishti Manipal School of Design and Technology in Bangalore. Now, she builds upon her past work through 2022 to 23. She's been awarded with the Fulbright Visiting Scholar Fellowship that takes a critical look into the intersectional milestones in Indian and American design histories. Congrats, Sarita, for that. That's really a great achievement, and I, on behalf of Arts, wish you great success in this endeavor of yours. Recently, Sarita has also written a book, The Seating Culture. Seating, as in, sitting, seats, furniture. The Seating Culture, which is scheduled, this book is scheduled to be released in the coming month of July, a couple of weeks from now. And now she'll tell us a little more about it. But overall, it is based on the research done on varieties of different seats and sitting styles that have evolved in different cultures and geographies, and you know. So, Sarita, over to you for an engaging session on her subject, which is the 10 tenets. Tenets, as in, commandments, rules that she has observed and she has created through an overview of her, you know, uh, research practices over the past 30 years. So, Sarita, over to you. We can't hear you. I think you are on mute.
Yes. Okay.
There we go.
You can hear me. Can you also see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much, Bhargav, for that introduction and for inviting me to speak to participants as part of this session that you've organized. Thank you so much to the Arch College also for the invitation. And to sort of give you a context, what I am going to be talking to you about today briefly is an overview of my research as well as my professional practice, give you a sense of the trajectory that I've followed. Today, I sort of do fairly different things than what I used to do earlier, but I kind of have evolved along the way. And along the way, I have come to sort of, I have sort of recognized a few things that have helped me in this creative journey. And that's what I wanted to share with you. And I will be sharing these tenets, so to speak, in the context of some of the projects that I have worked on. Yeah, let me know if, for instance, is anyone familiar with the word gargoyles? Is something that it's a strange word, but gargoyles are monsters, rakshasas in our sort of language, but they're the sort of monsters that we always sort of fear in the form of our everyday life as practitioners. It could be deadlines, it could be limitations, whatever. So how do we sort of fight these or overcome them, let's say. I started actually my educational journey doing mathematics actually in Delhi in St. Stephen's, and I quickly sort of left that to within a year. Not just because mathematics was something that I wasn't sort of keen on, but also because my I used to play basketball, and our basketball team lost every game. So I always sort of say that if my basketball team was very good, I probably would have stayed on and done mathematics. But it was sort of a trigger that, okay, I got to do something else. You know, maths is okay, basketball is not going well. And then when I applied, I got into NID and continued that sort of journey. And at NID, I did communication design. Um, um, and much later, I did actually a master's in museum studies at the University of Leicester. And I have worked for a while with a company called Reincarnation Design, along with, which was a seminal sort of design agency. I started also another sort of consultancy called Trapeze, and that was a multidisciplinary organization. I'll be showing a lot of work from that sort of thing. And the last 10 years or so, I started Hanno, and Hanno is a sort of more concentrated on interests that I share right now, which is on heritage and
One question that comes from
yeah.
here, if you can tell us what I've been wondering, what is Hanno?
Yeah.
How did the name
So
come from?
Hanno is that little image that you see there, and you can guess what it is. It is the name of an elephant. It's an elephant that was named in the 15th century, and it's an Indian elephant that was gifted to the Pope by the Portuguese sort of emperor at that time. And it was an actual elephant that went from South India all the way to Italy. It lived for a while. It was drawn by artists such as Raphael. There were poets who wrote about him and things like that. Unfortunately, he didn't live very long. Maybe he didn't get his favorite bananas or whatever it was. So, and he died. But I met this elephant, so to speak, in a particular project, which I will be showing you today, and was always charmed by the story. And also in Malayalam, actually, elephant is called Anai, which is sort of similar to Hanno, and probably that's how the name came about. So that's how the story is. And that's the back of my visiting card, and that's the little motif that we had drawn to sort of indicate.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but if anyone's interested, you can go and look at hanno.in and you'll see the sort of work that we do. So there's a fair amount of research and documentation that covers a range of things. We also work on storytelling in the print space, in the digital, as well as in the physical space. That means exhibition design, interactive and web, and a lot of sort of book design as well. And also communication and branding strategies. So the first one, so how does one sort of fight the gargoyles or negotiate, so to speak, the boundaries that the demons that we sometimes create ourselves and sometimes are thrust upon us? So the first one actually is a project that came, which was done a good 15, 20 years back, where we had to design the entire corporate identity, the sort of storytelling for a resort in Kerala. And there were various limitations because it was a large team of people, things that we agreed on, and how we had to sort of negotiate those sort of boundaries that are typically put into place because of a multidisciplinary team. So the title of this talk is Fighting the Gargoyles in 10 Tenets. And that's an overview of some of the things that I've done.
Yes.
And that's the little elephant that we were talking about, which was the Hanno, the motif that we created for my consultancy.
Right.
And if anyone wants to sort of quickly jot down the website address. The work that we do covers all these areas. And the first tenet that I'm talking about negotiating boundaries, and that's an image, as I said, of this resort that we had worked on in Kerala. This was part of my early organization, Trippies, where we sort of built on storytelling in places, in physical spaces. So that means like murals, sort of creating a narrative for the rooms. And the challenge, of course, was that there's so many different sort of team members. How does one come together, agree on things and things like that? How does one retain one's creativity through this entire sort of process, right? So here, this is a sort of a mural that's created of along the sort of one of the spaces in the resort, and we've worked with stone craftsmen from Pondicherry, we worked with wood craftsmen from Bangalore, and brought this entire thing to replicate to an extent what it looks like to be in the forests of Kerala. The resort was in Kerala.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Okay, Vasundhara.
Yes, Vasundhara is the name. So we created motifs that were drawn from the sort of culture of Kerala. You know, I'm from Kerala, so it helped. So I'm sort of, you know, there was terracotta, there was sort of wood, there was embroidery. There was a huge number of sort of team that was, you know, very multidisciplinary. So the challenges that were in place was, how does one sort of retain one's creative vision while still negotiating the sort of need for material sort of expertise that came with these sort of a large team. There was another mural that was created, embroidery, various textures, stone, wood, fiberglass, metal, fabric. And then also things like postcards that were sort of lively and sort of spoke about the sort of popular culture of the space, you know, the toddy culture, the tea shop culture, the music, the traditional music, popular music, classical music, folk music. And then we also created storytelling that would go digitally. So here you've got narratives that were in the print space, that were in the digital space, as well as in the physical space. And then the other sort of thing that I feel is a tenet that I follow is to throw your heart over the bars, and then the body will follow. In a sense, you know, if you were to sort of become a high jumper and you believe, once you believe that you can do something, it's a matter of putting your heart out there, and somehow the rest will happen. You believe strongly and this will happen. So this was a project that's very dear to my heart, and it actually set off my, both of these actually projects set off a sort of trajectory at looking at heritage in a way. This was looking at the sort of the Malabar herbal knowledge of the 16th and 17th centuries, and its transfer to the West through 5 or 6 books of that period. So a good 500, 600 years back, there were these books that talked about Malabar knowledge. So we used to coin also the names of the projects. So for instance, this name, Such Treasure, Enrich Merchandise, is referring to the wonderful sort of treasure that India had, and it was recognized for in that period. This was an exhibition that was held in Bangalore, and you see that this is a drawing of a fig tree, a banyan tree, and from an etching of that 15th century, 16th century actually. And we kind of created this drop down. This was in front of an institute, and you can actually walk through this drop down in the same way that you can actually walk through the roots of a banyan tree. So this was the sort of entrance to this exhibition that I'm speaking about. As you can see, that's the scale of it. What was the challenge here? The fabric kept falling down, and the director of the institute, called NCBS, said, I don't care, you have to have it hold up. How do you overcome that? We are not allowed to put a nail onto the walls or the ceiling, so how do you overcome that? We actually had someone stand there and every day tighten the fabric ropes, you know, just to make sure that it stayed for the period of the exhibition. That's our Hanno. So that's Hanno. That's from which I'm inspired by. The name of my consultancy is inspired by. He's speaking through these imagined sort of forests. You can see the fabric that you're seeing Hanno through. These are sort of panels that were put out in an open air environment. It was there for about 6 months or so at the institute. And these are sort of drawings of the herbs that are part of the Malabar tradition. It was a space that you could visit in the night. There's also a little stone carving, as you see below. That was also part of the, and there was a catalog that was printed alongside it. There were quotations that still survive 10, 15 years after this exhibition was done. It's there in the institute still, which talk about the sort of wonder that in India had created in the minds of Europeans. The other thing I hear a lot of youngsters sort of say, and that's why I'm sort of addressing it to you, is that, oh, this particular project wasn't great. So I kind of often tell them that, there's no such thing as a good or a bad project, or even people, or, you shouldn't sort of use that as an excuse. There is a way to sort of overcome these things. And I'm going to sort of talk to you about a few books that I've done. This was a book that is also an archival book, a history-based book with a historian who I still work with today. And the challenge here was that Penguin, the publisher, didn't want to sort of invest in a large coffee table book. We decided that we must sort of put in as much of the archival images as possible into the book. And even though the size was small, the paper was very inexpensive, uncoated Indian sort of sunshine paper, not expensive at all. But we still managed to sort of produce a book, which is still considered one of the first sort of books on the history of sort of early science and of a person who I hope most of you know, Homi J. Bhabha, who was sort of the father of a lot of the sort of space program and setting up institutes such as the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research. Some images from here, as you can see, even though it's a small book, but we managed to squeeze in things. There's a lot of archival material, which we had to sort of present in a manner that it didn't seem like, old fuddy. We wanted to make sure everything was crisp. So it's printed crisply. Letters that we wanted people to read and things like that. This is another book. Again, challenge was it was done with the Wipro sustainability division. There was very little material. There was hardly any budget. But again, we decided that's not going to sort of prevent us from sort of saying that our creative sort of solutions. What we did was we decided, like, for instance, here's an image, if most of you know. Anyone know? Would anyone in the audience like to hazard a guess what this little graphic sort of comic on the left represents? This is a book on sustainability in India. So as a hint.
Chipko movement.
Yes, there was hardly any material on the Chipko movement which could be made into a good, interesting graphic form. So we decided we'll draw out a little bit of a scene, which is a sort of a seminal scene, right, of women sort of hugging a tree. So the challenge was hardly any sort of budget, hardly any access to archival material. How do you do it? We sort of created illustrations. We wrote the entire book ourselves. This is an image of, again, a very, very seminal image, a photograph that was taken during the 1960s of an image of Earth seen from Apollo, one of the sort of spaceships that sort of had gone up, right? And this is an important image in the history of sustainability because it was the first image of the Earth seen from outside space, and the message that was given at that point by, I forget the person, was that you suddenly realize the beauty of Earth, but also its fragility, And so we decided to recreate it, though the actual photograph is also shown in the book. We accessed a lot of images from NASA, who, give a lot of their images for free. Some more images that you see that we created, talking about sustainability and self-sufficiency and not overburdening places like the oceans and overfishing. I'm going to go fast because I'd like to show more images from Chipko. This is an image of a poster that we did, again, with the history of, with the sustainability department at Wipro. And here we were talking about the story of water and the connectivity of water, because the fact that anything you do, a dam breaks here, it affects things over. So we've got this large poster, which just is a seamless sort of water connections that you can see. And you see a lot of the sort of important milestones as well as geographical as well as historical milestones in water. The other thing is that there is an importance in sort of not trying to repeat the thing that you did the previous time. So how does one sort of, that sort of earnestness that can come through into a project, I think is critical. This was something that a book that we'd worked on with the LV Prasad Eye Institute, which is a sort of an NGO that works with providing sight to places in rural Andhra Pradesh, and the various challenges that they face. And there was one statistic which I thought was very, very important, and I wanted to illustrate, which is that which is what anyone who works in the field of eye health uses as a sort of a focus point, which is that out of 4 people who are blind, you can medically cure 3 of them. So 3 out of 4 people who are blind can be cured if they have access to medical care. And that I thought was a very important sort of point. And we decided to make that as the cover of the book. So you've got, these 4 circles, 3 circles are cut through, one of them is blackened out. And that's a very positive, very reassuring aesthetic. So when you statistic. So when you sort of flip the pages in the book, you can actually look through and see the wonder of sight as represented in the eyes of people who are watching a shadow puppet performance in rural Andhra Pradesh. So 3 out of 4 people. So it's a little, gimmick, but also gets the point across. Blindness can be prevented or cured in 3 out of 4 people, right? We documented this sort of shadow puppet performance in rural Andhra Pradesh. It was a lovely sort of evening when we documented, but more importantly, we documented the eyes of people, the wonder of sight that is available. So I worked with a photographer friend, Ramu Aravindan, who was also my batchmate at NID, but has since become a photographer, and he took these wonderful photos. And there are these quotes which sort of say, how do you make a difference? What do? You have to go out to the people rather than expect them to come to us, because that was the purpose. That was what we. There are a lot of sort of infographics within the book, which again follow the metaphor of eyesight or anything to do with eyes. There's a pyramid of trust that their model, this LVPI Eye Institute, their model has been used across in Africa and Australia, which is the delivery of eye health. And if you can see, this is the pyramid, if you see, and that's a reverse pyramid. So anyone at the bottom of the pyramid can access 5,000, a population of 5,000. And I'll show you how they do that. So there's a girl who goes out. She goes and checks the sights of people in rural Andhra Pradesh. She gets them in an auto, a van, whatever it is, to a little clinic, which is the second tier of the pyramid. And then, decides whether that person needs glasses, an operation, or more important sort of medical care, which can then be escalated to the Hyderabad center. More sort of graphics on infographics. And I fell in love with Andhra Pradesh, so I took photographs of Andhra Pradesh. Unabashedly, we added it into the book. And Ramu, after that project, said, there's something film-like about your books, because there's this, you kind of build this narratives into montages and film sequences. And I always sort of remember that kind of sort of thing that he's talked about. The other thing is that I feel that when you're sort of caught up with projects and things like that, it's important as a creative tool to sort of do things that are outside of your sort of client-driven practice. And that, I believe, feeds back not just your soul, because you're doing something for yourself, but it feeds back your own sort of creative practice. So, it's important, therefore, to make any sort of happy experiments. And this was a little exhibition that I participated in Bangalore, and it was invited. The invitation came from a group that was working with natural papers, and they said, can you make an artist book out of our natural paper, so banana fiber paper? So there were, as part of the group, a number of people from, there were fashion designers, there were artists, and a couple of us sort of designers as well. So I decided to take on the story of Alice in Wonderland and decided to make a dress out of this banana fiber, and within the dress are these sort of quotes from Alice in Wonderland. I love Alice in Wonderland. So you see, all this is text that is there. Some, do cats like bats, do bats like cats, and things like that. That's woven in. So I worked with a weaver. Yeah, you might know Sanchita Dasgupta. I used her sort of weaving workshop to help me weave these texts that I had printed and then stripped out and made. And there are, little things like a key and things like that. So here, what I'm trying to say is that it's important to do things that are not sort of driven by, say, clients or deadlines. Oh, well, there was a deadline, but at least it's something that kind of just frees yourself and helps you to sort of feedback not just your soul, but also your other professional practice, Some details from the dress. It's called Alice's dress, and Alice's dress traveled from Bangalore. It went to China and to Bangkok as well for other artist book exhibitions. So it was nice to see. Another sort of lot of experiments that were done, part of an installation that we did, working with, your hands and your material sort of things and things like that. So we worked with, this was an installation that was supposed to go, that did go at a film studio in Bangalore. And they just said, we just want some nice installation. So I decided to illustrate this idea of if pigs can fly, which means that, if you can let your wings of imagination loose, if pigs can fly, everything can happen. So I decided to sort of make this little piggy with wings. And the challenge was that I wanted someone to sort of do the copper work over this wax machette that was created. There was only one person who could do it. And, we went to this person and we said, iske upar aapko, you have to create a sort of a copper this thing. And he was a very good craftsman. He said, बहन हम ये नहीं कर सकते. So I said, क्यों क्या problem है? ये सुअर है, हम नहीं touch करेंगे. So he just refused. So it was a very interesting sort of point that happened where we were relying on this person to sort of do this copper thing. And he said, no, I will not touch this, even though it's made of wax. It was an interesting sort of challenge. So we ended up doing it ourselves or with other help. Didn't come out as well as I would have liked to, but it's just a story. Some other sort of installations that were done, again, using materials. So these are different people in my team who worked with waste metal, created waste tires to create installations on conveying the idea of sustainability. The other thing is that it's important, I believe, that to sort of look ahead in your period and, to sort of see ahead. And here I'm showing an installation that was done when I was at Trapeze. This was conceived and designed by Ram Sinam, Bhargav.
Yes.
And he had done a series of wonderful sort of installations for the Asian Paints. And I later sort of said, it was the possibility of seeing, to looking beyond, around the corner.
Yeah.
And I'll just illustrate to you. If you look at the screen, you'll see how it sort of works. So we had to show the new shades that Asian Paints were coming up with.
Mm-hmm.
And if you walk around the installation, ta-da, you see the new shades, So, so there is this sense that, how does one sort of challenge what you've seen before and yet come up with something that's sort of unique, make sure that you're not repeating yourself and things like that.
Yeah.
And The other thing I felt was that even though sometimes the content comes to you from other sources, it is possible in most communication projects, in most even industrial design projects, to put a little bit of your own sort of soul into it. So here we've got another project which is to do with archives and stuff like that. And here we are talking about the story of the typewriter in India. There were a series of articles that came, and we had to create an archival book. Challenges were most of the articles were so varied, they were so different. Now, how does one sort of create a synergy across that? So what we did was we actually wrote some of the pieces that helped to tie these pieces together. And this particular image is a redrawing of an old archival document. But what we did was that the title of the book sort of comes out the way in which a paper in a typewriter is unscrolled. The other challenge and what we did was, and Bhargav, if you don't have this book, please do try and order it. It's available on Amazon. If you can't get it on Amazon, I will connect you to Godrej Archives, who will get it for you, because it's a book that what we've done is, the challenge here was to make it interactive. I knew that a lot of people today haven't ever used a typewriter, but I wanted them to get a sense of what it was, the tactility, the sort of sensorial quality of working with a machine like the typewriter, which we have lost when we use um, um, the wonderful sort of computers, right? But how do you convey that? And there were various little devices that we used for that. Here's the original, but reversed out, the drawing of the book. You kind of see how it comes out of the paper, out of the typewriter, the paper coming out of the typewriter.
Yeah.
These are a series of images from a film, which sort of has this song that says "typewriter tip tip" with Helen dancing on a typewriter. Right. Actually, it's an old film, a merchant ivory film called Bombay Talkies. Yeah. And the other thing was that I wanted to sort of also in some way convey, there is this whole lot of thing about, like, pangrams. If anyone doesn't know what a pangram is, the famous one, if you see this image in the center, can anyone recognize what that is? If anyone's done typing exams or typing. It is the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy brown dog. And that one sentence is called a pangram because it uses all 26 letters of the English alphabet, and it's often used as a sort of a typing sort of test. And it's only when you sort of go for sort of exams or learn typing that you did that. But there are a lot of pangrams like this. And what we did was we've hidden these sort of illustrations across the book, and you can only get to the answers when you go to the end. So you have number 2, this one, and you have to guess what it is, and you see the answer to the end. So in a sense, how do you make a book interactive? How do you sort of make people engage with the book, which is actually a flat medium? The next thing we did was we put a carbon paper. Well, we didn't put a carbon paper, but what you see is what looks like a carbon paper. Again, a lot of people in, the younger generation didn't know what a carbon paper was. So we decided to sort of actually show it. Of course, you can't actually put an actual carbon paper into a book because your hands will be smudgy. But what we did was we did this little trick. So after, when you turn the page of the carbon paper, there's a little blue thumbprint, which is on the paper. And you think you've done it. I don't know if I have it on this thing, but it's there. So you kind of think, oh my God, I've actually smudged the paper because of the ink, This is another display of an artist's work who actually took a typewriter and took an impression and put it. So that is also in the book. And then, this is a line from that same film that I talked about, the Bombay Talkies, which says the typewriter is such that zindagi ki har kahani likhta hai, And we've, of course, typed it out, put it in. These are the sort of essays that we wrote to connect these very disparate articles that came in. The other thing is that I feel whatever you do, whether it is a communication project or whether it is a sort of an industrial design project, there is a sort of story to be done, to be sort of, there's an opportunity for a story to be told. So why not? Now, this is a book that I had worked along with this pastoral group, sort of a center for pastoralism, a center that works with pastoralists across India. And they said they wanted a small graphic novel. They didn't say graphic novel. They said they want a learner's book on pastoralism in India. So I decided rather than giving them a textbook, let me tell the story of 4 pastoralists across India. Pastoralists, by the way, are nomads who move with animals. They're basically your Gujars. I think in Rajasthan, you'll have the Maldharis. They are basically animal sort of nomads.
Yeah.
So what we've got is these 4 stories that are of 4 pastoralists across India, one from Andhra, one from sort of Himachal, one from Ladakh, and from Gujarat. And their trials, their tribulations are told in the form of a little graphic story, 4 stories actually. So here you have, again, this book is available, Bhargav, if you're interested. If you can't find it on Amazon, it's called The World Without a Roof. And the name came from one of the pastoralists telling his father that, you know, I don't want to become, and that's the little story here. He's saying, I don't want to become a bus driver or a cook if I go to a village. I want to live like you, Father. I want to be a pastoralist. I want to live in a place where there is which is a world without a roof. You know, that's how the name. The other thing, the 9th of our tenets that I'm talking about is the importance of sort of building bridges, you know, building bridges between research and practice, between anthropology across disciplines, anthropology, art, and stuff like that. How do you sort of build those bridges? How do you sort of connect different disciplines together? Now, this is an identity that we worked with for a very interesting group based in Bangalore that teaches, or rather encourages and facilitates sort of citizens' action. So they're saying that everyone should become a sort of a citizen warrior when it comes to tackling issues of sort of garbage, issues of sort of water, all the sort of urban concerns that we deal with, and saying that we can't always rely on the government and things like that. Each of us should become warriors. So we decided to call it Solve Ninjas. They're ninjas who will solve the problems. And we gave a lot of these ninjas these particular personas. So you have Build-A-Bear and I forget all of them, but who are they? Reporting Rhino. So you can become a reporter, you can become a sort of techno tiger, you can become a Build-A-Bear, you can become a curious cat and things like that, you know. And this was addressing the school children, but also college people. This was a little diary that we did for another sustainability. As you can see, sort of a rhythm here. I do work with in the fields that I'm interested in. So things like sustainability, heritage, these are things that concern me. So this is an organization that creates sort of solar power as well as wind power sort of facilities. And they asked us to do something as simple as a diary. The diary can be boring, right? So we decided that let's make it exciting for us. And I decided to bring together my 2 interests on sustainability and heritage and put this into the diary. And here is what we decided was to find out myths that have to do with the earth's, with the sort of energies from the earth, which is the sun, water, and the wind, right? And we have in Hindu mythology, as well as in mythology across the world, sort of gods or that are connected to these, right? And rather than sort of eulogize these gods or make them religious, we decided to create a vignette of a story that is from some of these myths of energies. So sun, right? That's Surya. Now, the typical depiction of Surya is with his chariots and his 7 horses, is it? So here, this little vignette that I wanted to sort of depict in the diary is an image of Surya meeting his wife, and his wife could never sort of meet him because his brilliance was so much that he would blind her. So here we are sort of focusing on the brilliance of Surya, right? And therefore, the only place he could visit her was in a forest, because then his brilliance was sort of subdued by the forest. So that's the little sort of image of Surya going in his chariot to the forest to meet his wife. So one is, of course, water, and that's the god of water. And here on the top is Vayu, who's depicted bringing the sort of the tip of the mountain down. So but it gives you a sense of storytelling and things. Now, this is a project which you sort of read out, Bhargav, about
Yeah.
research project that I did with the India Foundation for the Arts. I'm from Kerala. I was interested to understand what the various folk forms from my village was, and so it's a research project. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but these are some images, and it's and some sketches from my diary of the work that I did there. I think I'll go through this fast. The other thing that I've done is I've written, and I'm writing, continue to write, sort of do a little bit of research on the history of sort of graphic design in India. And that's, I've spoken about it in a few typography seminars, and that was the name of the title of the paper, Indians Don't Like White Space. I kind of study how schooled as well as sort of popular graphics sit against the more sort of studied and practiced professional practices.
Yeah.
This is another paper that I'd written, so I'm not going to go too much into it. Now, the last few things that I'm going to show, one is this, again, a research project which looked at women from Karnataka history that people don't know much about. And here it's called Mahila Bhava Chitragalu, which literally means story of women from history. And so I worked with an intern who sort of did a lot of research on these lesser known women in Karnataka history, and then came to the conclusion that well-behaved women seldom make history. This is actually a quote from a historian. But what we did was we decided to create a sort of a workshop. So we had a workshop where we invited people, and I work with this lady who's on the left, Best Frimodik, a lot. And we often do print workshops. She's a brilliant printmaker. So I sort of told the story of these various women, and she showed these participants of the workshop over a period of 3 hours how to sort of convey their ideas of the lesser known women, not just in history, but from their own lives. So we created postcards. This was just over 3 hours in an afternoon where we introduced these stories of women, and then each person told their own sort of stories. So the idea is to sort of create this very, very, engaged way of working with history. So you're not only looking and reading through books, but you're kind of looking at history and then connecting it to your everyday lives today. These were some of the postcards that were created. And then the last one that I'm talking about is to sort of break the fourth wall, which means to sort of cut across communication sort of barriers. It's a term from theater parlance that is there. And how do you get participative sort of involvement? Here again, this is an image of an exhibition designed by my earlier design partner, Ram Sinam. And this was an exhibition that we all sort of helped him put together, but he was the sort of visionary behind it. And it's called Soak. It looks at the sort of the Bombay rains. But and it's a very academic sort of exhibition, but we decided we wanted to do something that was a bit more participative. And so this is an installation called Collective Memory, and it sort of invites participation from, these are images from that installation.
Mm-hmm.
This is another exhibition where we also, which I did as part of Hanno, which looks at, tell me if I'm overcrossing time, Bhargav, or do I have another 10 minutes?
Just go ahead. Please go ahead.
Okay, so this is another exhibition which tells the story of Godrej, but through an archival lens. And I'm going to try and play the videos that are part of it. This exhibition is still there in Bombay. If anyone wants to visit, please let me know or write directly to Godrej Archives, and they will make sure that you have the necessary passes to go in. It was done in 2017 or 18, I forget. And it employs a lot of digital technologies. So there's a lot of archival material. We had very little space. Again, think of challenges that are there. But what we did was we allowed people to have a sort of an immersive experience in the space, but also connect to archival materials online. This one, I'll play the other one later. So it says, unlock here to see where Godrej locks were born. So you can actually physically unlock. So as you turn the wheel, which is actually one of the wheels from a safe, you see archival material emerge. So even in a limited space, you can sort of overcome challenges of, you know. So here we've sort of recreated the exhibition on the floor, and you can actually walk through the exhibition like these stations, and there are these Kindles that are there, but you can actually, and each of these stations are the various factories of Godrej. But when you go up here, you can actually play audio, video, see archival photos of those stations. So it was called Plant 19, Plant 11 for, various exhibitions. And here you can actually play information on these little things. I'm tempted to show this one last film.
The answer is elections. Through elections, our entire adult population can choose its representatives to form the government.
That was the first election ballot box that was done for the first election of India. And, you show this metal box on the side in an exhibition, you're going to walk by it. But what we did was we managed to get an old films division film, which talked about it and showed it alongside, and along with people sort of actually putting their sort of votes into the box. So you get a sense of making an object that can look very dead in an exhibition, making it alive. So we projected this film also alongside. A few images to show, which are from the same exhibition. There's a lot of graphic. There's actually smells that you can do. We recreated the early soaps. Yeah. And then the last thing that I sort of say always is the 11th tenet, that there's always a cocktail at the end of the rainbow.
For the print workshop, did you use printings or paints?
We used
women's workshop.
Yeah, 1 minute, let me stop share.
Right.
We used, actually we decided to use simple inks because we didn't know whether there were children. We didn't want to use toxic inks, but you can actually use printing inks as well. So it's a very hands-on workshop. We wanted to be washed through. You can actually use even natural sort of ways to dye. Yeah. Flowers, all that kind of things. Fabric paints, anything.
See, all the tenets that you have spoken about, each one of them are really gems, especially for the upcoming students, for upcoming professionals, for everyone as such. Especially, some which really, some of them which are very, very crucial, like one of them being that there is no good or bad project. And especially students, they always feel, oh, that was not so good, not so good. So even between teachers and mentors, if that understanding is there, and which allows for creativity to, or creativity or any progress to happen, it should not be hindered in any way. So I think these kind of tenets go a long way. Very, very well put. I mean, your way of delivering, sharing your project's experiences through these learnings, through these tenets has been, I think this will go a long way to all the listeners here or viewers. So, there is another question which has come up. Let's see what that is. What are the scopes for an internship at Hanno? Nobody means business now.
Okay, this is hard facts. Well, right now, I am. There are only two ways that we can have internship right now, because as Bhargav sort of mentioned earlier, I am going for a sort of a fellowship. I'm going to teach at a university in in America from August. So this year is going to be a little tough to take on physical interns. However, there is scope of one particular sort of um, consultants client that I work with, that is the Center for Pastoralism and Sajivan. They're based both in Bhuj as well as in Delhi. And what I have been trying to do is to sort of place interns there. I will continue to mentor, but it will be remotely. And they do fantastic work. For instance, the graphic novel that you saw, they came up with an exhibition. I don't know if you've seen that exhibition, Bhargav, called Living Lightly.
Living lightly.
Yes. So, do you know Shabnam Virmani, who's
Shabnam,
got,
yes, of
uh,
course.
so she also participated in that exhibition because, a lot of the sort of Kabir Dohas and stuff like that are connected to the pastoralists and
Where is
pastoralist
it?
groups such as Aldhari. So the
When
Living Lightly exhibition was held in, again, 2017, I think, in Delhi at the IGNCA, but it's a traveling exhibition and it is going to come to Bangalore, I think, in January. It was held in Ahmedabad. But my point being that there are a lot of interesting sort of projects that they do.
right.
They do exhibitions. The graphic novel that I did was one. They're looking at building a sort of a repository of stories. They've started camel cheese workshops, so there's a lot of collateral and print needed for that.
Right.
There are textile designers needed to work with their Desi own
Yeah.
prices. They work with the wool of
Mm.
um, so if anyone's interested, I'm happy to sort of connect you to them and then I can mentor, but remotely.
I'm
Because
sure.
I mentor anyhow all the communication remotely
Mhm.
over 2-3
That's,
sessions.
that will take note of that, and people will definitely get in touch with you.
Sure.
So, yeah. So, Sarita, what about, can you tell us just a little more about your Fulbright scholarship, and how do you like, what do you see in there, and how do you plan to
So,
bring it
as I
on?
said, right now, when I'm in the process of sort of wrapping up the production of this book,
Yeah,
which looks at seating culture in India, which primarily looks at your very traditional sort of pidhas and seats like that, but it also goes to look at modernism. So, for instance, the influences of NID,
yeah,
of Chandigarh, Corbusier, Godrej themselves, looks at sort of seats that have come out of this. People like GU and Ranjan and all of them are sort of featured, but it
right,
also goes all the way down to present day sort of
yes,
seats and the engagements that present day designers have with the traditions of India, but with modern sort of technologies. So
right,
when I was doing all that, I realized there's a wealth of information that's hidden that I could not access
yeah,
because they're in within institutional archives, within governmental archives. And that's when I decided to sort of apply for a Fulbright to
yeah,
see whether I could sort of look further into it. So my Fulbright will be looking at these sort of design histories and particular sort of gaps that I found and looking
right,
at them in detail. But I'm also teaching a course at the University of Vermont, which is looking at the visual culture of India. So it's a sort of teaching and research fellowship.
so this will be about 1 year. Uh,
It's officially, yeah, one academic year, but it's nine
okay.
months.
Yeah, yeah, okay, great. I think that
And once I come back, my hope and wish is to sort of convey a lot of that to other institutes across India like yours, and to sort of maybe uh,
no,
bring that information. And it is one of the mandates of Fulbright that one
right,
should sort of share
yeah.
one's learnings with peers and young in the field.
Yeah, so Sarita, we definitely would like to, have you with us in
So,
some way or the other. See, there is so much of learning here, as you can see. It's not simply when we go and study, say, communication design in a college that, we say the elements of typography, the visuals, the colors, the textures, and it's not just that. As she correctly put, it's the storytelling, how you connect things, how you are able to. Now, that will only happen if we have that curious mind, that mind and eye which observes very intently and is able to analyze, ingest, and take it into totally another form. So all the projects that we've seen right from the book on the typewriter, which we have a very inspiring personality here. So everyone doing any form of design, do learn from these and make your own tenets in time to come. And in the meanwhile, I'm sure Sarita will come up with several more, which we'll share later in time. So good. Otherwise, I think we had a real nice session, Sarita. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your vast experiences and knowledge with all of us.
So much for having me. It was good. It's always good to sort of look through one's own work and, in the context, especially when speaking to people like this, it gives you a chance to sort of ruminate and analyze and sort of figure out why you did what you did. So thanks for the opportunity.
Extremely inspiring.